proxy wars do not begin with bombs. They begin with decisions made far from the battlefield. They begin in conference rooms, intelligence briefings, and quiet calculations where powerful states choose influence over responsibility. By the time bullets fly, the real war has already been decided. The country hosting the conflict becomes a stage, not a player. A proxy war is not fought to win peace, it is fought to avoid loss. Strong states avoid direct confrontation because it is expensive, risky, and unpredictable. Instead, they outsource violence. They arm local groups, fund militias, provide intelligence, and shape narratives. On paper, they stay clean. On the ground, countries are torn apart. Syria did not collapse because its people wanted war. It collapsed because internal unrest collided with global rivalries. What began as protests quickly became opportunity. Regional powers saw a chance to weaken enemies. Global powers saw leverage. Weapons flooded in faster than solutions. Every faction gained a sponsor. Every sponsor gained a battlefield. Once that happened, Syria stopped being a country. It became a map of interests. Iran sought survival of an ally. Russia sought strategic foothold. The United States sought containment without ownership. Turkey sought border security. Gulf states sought influence. None sought reconstruction. None paid the price of chaos. Proxy wars thrive on fragmentation. Unity is dangerous because it limits control. Divided societies are easier to manipulate. Militias replace institutions. Loyalty replaces law. Violence becomes currency. Over time, the original cause of conflict fades. What remains is competition for survival. Yemen followed the same path with different players. A local power struggle turned into a regional proxy war. Iran gained influence cheaply. Saudi Arabia inherited a war with no clear exit. The country collapsed economically. Famine spread. Infrastructure vanished. No decisive victory came because proxy wars are not designed to end. The logic is cruel but effective. As long as external sponsors benefit from stalemate, conflict continues. Civilians suffer. Leaders endure. Peace becomes irrelevant. Ukraine shows that proxy war logic is not limited to weak states. It can destroy developed nations too. Ukraine became a front line not because it sought war, but because it sat between power blocks. Russia saw expansion as threat. NATO saw resistance as deterrence. Weapons poured in. Sanctions escalated. The battlefield hardened. For Ukraine, the cost is existential. Cities destroyed. Population displaced. Economy shattered. For sponsors, the cost is manageable. Influence gained. Rivals weakened. Lessons learned. Proxy wars scale suffering downward and benefits upward. The most dangerous feature of proxy warfare is duration. They do not end with victory. They end when sponsors lose interest or shift priorities. Until then, violence sustains itself. Children grow up knowing nothing else. Trauma replaces memory. Hatred becomes inheritance. Institutions die first. Courts stop functioning. Police lose authority. Education collapses. Health systems crumble. When war becomes permanent, survival replaces citizenship. Militias provide order where states fail. Power decentralizes violently. External actors often speak of peace while fueling war. Ceasefires are negotiated, then ignored. Talks occur while weapons arrive. Diplomacy becomes performance. Real leverage lies with those who supply arms. Proxy wars also distort accountability. No one owns the destruction. Sponsors deny responsibility. Local leaders blame outsiders. Civilians are left without justice. War crimes fade into statistics. Reconstruction is promised but delayed indefinitely. Economies do not recover easily from proxy conflict. Investment avoids uncertainty. Skilled populations flee. Brain drain becomes permanent. Aid replaces production. Dependency deepens. Sovereignty erodes quietly. The social damage lasts longer than physical destruction. Trust disappears. Communities fracture. Revenge becomes normalized. Even when fighting slows, peace feels unsafe. Weapons remain. Militias adapt. Violence lingers. Proxy wars succeed because they are cheap for the powerful and catastrophic for the weak. They preserve deniability while maximizing pressure. They allow escalation without responsibility. The world pretends proxy wars are limited conflicts. They are not. They are slow-motion collapses. They destroy countries not in days, but in decades. And when they end, the damage remains. This is the true cost of proxy warfare. Not just destroyed cities, but broken futures. Proxy wars do not end when headlines fade. They end when nothing is left to destroy, or when the sponsors decide the cost is no longer worth the leverage. Until then, the country caught in between continues to bleed in silence. Ukraine exposes a brutal truth the world prefers to ignore. Proxy warfare is no longer confined to fragile states. It can devastate modern nations too. What separates Ukraine from Syria or Yemen is not immunity, but visibility. When the fighting began, Ukraine still had institutions, infrastructure, and international sympathy. Yet, even with massive support, the logic of proxy war remains unchanged. External powers frame their involvement as defense, deterrence, or values. But for the battlefield nation, survival becomes conditional. Aid arrives with expectations. Weapons arrive with timelines. Strategy is influenced by donors. Sovereignty erodes not through occupation alone, but through dependency. Proxy wars trap countries in a permanent state of urgency. Emergency laws replace normal governance. Military priorities override social needs. Civil liberties shrink under security pressure. Even democratic systems begin to harden. War reshapes politics long before it reshapes borders. The economy suffers next. War economies do not create wealth, they redistribute scarcity. Inflation rises, currency weakens, public debt explodes. Reconstruction becomes theoretical while destruction remains constant. Even when money flows in, it flows unevenly, often enriching contractors and intermediaries more than citizens. Society fractures along lines of loyalty and survival. Those who fight are praised, those who flee are questioned, those who question are silenced. Identity becomes rigid, nuance disappears. Proxy wars simplify reality into sides and sides into enemies. In Syria, generations grew up knowing only checkpoints, airstrikes, and displacement. Education became sporadic. Trauma became normal. In Yemen, hunger weaponized poverty. In Ukraine, displacement reshaped demographics overnight. Each case different, the pattern identical. Proxy wars also export instability. Refugees cross borders. Arms circulate beyond battlefields. Militias become transnational. Criminal networks thrive. The war does not stay contained. It leaks outward, destabilizing regions that never chose involvement. Sponsors often claim they can manage escalation. History shows they cannot. Proxy wars evolve. New actors enter. Old red lines fade. Weapons meant for deterrence change hands. Conflicts internationalize slowly, then suddenly. Another illusion is that proxy wars weaken enemies without risk. They do not. They normalize violence. They harden positions. They reduce space for diplomacy. When wars are fought indirectly, compromise becomes betrayal rather than resolution. The most destructive outcome is psychological. Proxy wars teach societies that peace is fragile and violence is reliable. That lesson outlives the conflict. Post-war states struggle to rebuild trust. Militias resist disarmament. Politics remains militarized. Elections become contested by force rather than ideas. Reconstruction fails when accountability is absent. Who pays for destruction when no one officially caused it? Sponsors deny responsibility. Local leaders lack capacity. International aid fills gaps but not wounds. Corruption thrives in chaos. Justice becomes selective or symbolic. Over time, the original reason for war disappears entirely.
What remains is momentum, violence sustained by habit, profit, and fear. Peace talks fail because no actor fully controls the battlefield anymore. Proxy wars destroy countries not only by breaking them, but by trapping them in limbo, not fully at war, not fully at peace, too unstable to thrive, too exhausted to resist. The global system tolerates proxy wars because they delay confrontation among the powerful. But delay is not prevention, it is displacement. The cost is paid by those with the least influence over the decisions that matter. Syria, Yemen, and Ukraine are not anomalies. They are warnings. They show what happens when power competes without responsibility and influence is pursued without ownership. As long as proxy wars remain acceptable tools of strategy, countries will continue to be sacrificed for balance elsewhere. Cities will be destroyed to send messages. Populations will suffer to test limits. The tragedy is not that proxy wars happen. The tragedy is that they work for those who start them. And until the world decides that destroying nations to avoid direct confrontation is unacceptable, proxy wars will remain the most efficient way to break countries without declaring war at all.